all just drinking, and we played cards against humanity.
You get all this information and you go, wait, nothing makes sense here.
Ralph Fernandez, the attorney for Tamla's husband, says he's gone through the evidence, every interview, document, and scene photo. So has Tamla's father and friends like Michelle Graves.
Why not just let this go?
I cannot let this go because I know that what they said did not happen to her.
Imagine attending a casual slumber party with friends, laughter filling the room, games being played, and drinks flowing. But by morning, someone is dead, and questions about what truly happened remain unanswered. This is the story of Tamla Horsford, a devoted mother of 5 whose death in 2018 was ruled an accident, but has left many asking, was it truly an accident? Or was there something more sinister at play? Tamla Horsford was the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. Born in the Caribbean, she grew up surrounded by the vibrant culture and warmth of island life. Her upbringing shaped her into a joyful, caring, and charismatic woman. Tamla carried that same warmth with her when she moved to the United States to start a new chapter in her life. Settling in Georgia, she built a loving home with her husband and their 5 children. Family was at the heart of everything Tamla did. She was a devoted mother who balanced her busy life with an unwavering focus on her kids. Whether it was cheering them on at their sports games or helping with homework, Tamla always made time for her family. Her friends often said that she had an incredible ability to juggle the demands of being a wife, mother, and friend without ever losing her infectious smile. She was someone who truly lit up every room she walked into. Tamla was also known for her adventurous and fun-loving personality. She loved to laugh, dance, and enjoy life to the fullest. Her positivity was contagious, and she was often the one bringing people together, whether it was for a casual get-together or a special celebration. She was the friend you could count on, the mom who always showed up, and the partner who made life brighter. To those who knew her, Tamla's life seemed like a dream. She was raising a beautiful family, nurturing deep friendships, and spreading joy wherever she went. Her life wasn't just about her accomplishments, but about the connections she made and the love she gave freely to others. It was hard to imagine anything dark or tragic entering her world, but life can change in an instant. For Tamla, that change came on a seemingly ordinary November night in 2018. What started as a fun evening out with friends ended in an unimaginable tragedy. The woman who had been so full of life, love, and laughter was suddenly gone, leaving a gaping hole in the hearts of those who loved her. In the days that followed, her family and friends struggled to make sense of what had happened. How could someone so vibrant, so full of energy, be taken so suddenly? For many, her death felt like more than a tragedy. It felt like a mystery. And as the details of that night began to surface, the questions only grew. Who was responsible for the loss of this remarkable woman? And would the truth ever come to light? On the evening of November 3rd, 2018, Tamla Horsford joined a group of friends for a slumber party at the home of Jean Myers in Cumming, Georgia. Jean was a fellow football mom, and the gathering was meant to be a relaxed celebration of her birthday. It was an intimate setting, a group of moms coming together to unwind, laugh, and enjoy some time away from their usual responsibilities. The atmosphere seemed friendly and casual, with food, drinks, and a night of lighthearted fun planned. Tamla, a devoted mother of 5, was known for her warm and outgoing personality. She was the kind of person who could light up a room, and that night was no different. Although she was the only Black woman at the party, by all accounts, she appeared to be at ease, enjoying the company of the other women. Photos from earlier in the evening showed Tamla smiling, laughing, and fully engaging in the festivities. It seemed like an ordinary night, a chance to connect and celebrate. As the night wore on, the group played games, shared drinks, and chatted. Tamla had a few drinks herself and was reportedly in high spirits. Around 1:30 a.m., most of the guests decided to call it a night, retreating to their respective sleeping areas within the house. Tamla, however, stayed awake. She was known to enjoy the occasional late-night moment to herself, and this night was no exception. She stepped out onto the back deck to smoke a cigarette, a common habit for her. It was a cold November night, but Tamla seemed content, enjoying the quiet solitude after an evening of celebration. By the time morning came, the mood had shifted dramatically. Around 7:30 a.m., Tamla's lifeless body was discovered in the backyard, face down on the grass. Panic quickly spread among the remaining partygoers, and 911 was called.
Forsyth County 911.
Hi, yes. I need an ambulance and a police to my home.
What's the address?
4450 Woodlet Court.
4450 Woodlake?
Woodlet.
Woodlet, okay. All right, 4450 Woodlet Court. What is your name?
My name is John Myers, Jeanne.
Okay, and your phone number is 609.
Yes.
Okay, what's going on?
We had people over last night when we were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking, and we just went outside, and she's laying face down in the backyard. It looks like, I'm guessing maybe she fell off the balcony, but she's stiff.
Okay, is she breathing?
I don't know if she's face down.
Okay, how old is she?
41. Here, hold on.
Hey, this is Jose Barrera.
Hey, have y'all checked to see if she's breathing?
She's not moving one bit. She's not breathing.
Okay.
I just try to assess her, touch her. She's completely face down in the yard. She is stiff.
The situation was surreal and unthinkable. The woman who had been full of life just hours earlier was now gone. The initial reaction from those at the party suggested shock and confusion, but the questions began almost immediately. How did Tamla end up outside? What had happened in the hours after the others had gone to bed? The official explanation pointed to an accidental fall from the deck.
The state of Georgia medical examiner has ruled the death accidental and consistent with a fall.
Wednesday, Forsyth County Sheriff's Major Joe Perkins announced a GBI-led autopsy found no signs of foul play.
But as investigators began to examine the scene, the circumstances of Tamla's death became less clear. Injuries, inconsistencies, and unanswered questions left her family and many others searching for the truth about what happened during those crucial hours in the early morning of November 4th, 2018.
Her injuries are not consistent with what they're saying. This is so fishy. I just don't want it to get out of hand.
Her father says a pathologist they hired found injuries on Tamla's body they believe happened after she was already dead.
The investigation into Tamla Horsford's death began with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. From the start, law enforcement classified the case as an accident. The official narrative suggested that Tamla, after drinking heavily throughout the evening, accidentally fell from the second-story deck of the home.
In the case of Tamla Horsford, who was found dead in the backyard of a Forsyth County home in 2018, the Sheriff's Office has now asked the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to take another look at her case.
Now, Cheryl, this comes just days after Horsford's family attorney claimed there was a strong possibility that someone killed her.
According to authorities, the injuries she sustained were consistent with a fall, and the case appeared, at least on the surface, to be straightforward. However, as details emerged, cracks in the official story became apparent, leaving her family and many others questioning what really happened. An autopsy conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reported multiple blunt force injuries to Tamla's head, neck, and torso. These injuries were described as consistent with a fall from a height.
Toxicology reports showed her blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit that night, but the case was met with a lot of speculation online.
Tamla's blood alcohol level was reported to be 0.238, almost 3 times the legal limit for driving, and traces of marijuana and Xanax were also found in her system. Authorities suggested that her intoxication might have impaired her balance and judgment, leading to the fall. While the autopsy provided a clinical explanation of her injuries, it raised more questions than it answered. Among the injuries listed were a laceration to her heart, a dislocated wrist, and abrasions on her face and body. While blunt force trauma can explain many of these injuries, the nature and severity of some of them seemed inconsistent with a simple fall. Her family, in particular, was troubled by the fact that her injuries included multiple points of impact. Could all of these injuries have been caused by a fall from the deck, or was there another explanation? Adding to the family's doubts were the circumstances surrounding the discovery of her body. Tamla was found face down, a position that some argued was inconsistent with a natural fall. Furthermore, it was reported that her body had been moved before law enforcement arrived, a detail that raised concerns about potential evidence being compromised. The homeowner's boyfriend, who worked in law enforcement, was allegedly involved in moving the body and securing the scene before investigators arrived. This raised serious ethical questions about the impartiality and thoroughness of the investigation.
It's the weirdest thing. She was face down, but like her arms were down, like she just face planted is the best way I can describe it.
So her arms were like by her side?
Yeah, they were by her side, palms up.
Did you ever touch her arm? No. Okay. Did you see anybody touch her? No, other than you? No.
Witness statements from the partygoers also presented inconsistencies. Some attendees reportedly changed their accounts over time, adding to suspicions that crucial details might have been omitted or altered. The timeline of events, what happened between 1:30 a.m. when Tamla was last seen alive and 7:30 a.m. when her body was discovered, remained unclear. Why didn't anyone hear or see anything? How could a fall from the deck have gone unnoticed for so many hours? The racial dynamics of the case also became a focal point. As the only black woman at the party, Tamla's presence stood out in a predominantly white setting. Forsyth County's history of racial tension and its predominantly white population led many to question whether her case was handled with the same urgency and care that it might have received under different circumstances. These concerns became a rallying cry for justice advocates who pushed for a deeper investigation. Despite the official ruling of an accidental death, Tamla's family was unconvinced. They commissioned an independent autopsy to seek answers, but the results only deepened their doubts. Forensic experts questioned whether the injuries were consistent with the fall described in the official report. The lack of clear answers and the perceived shortcomings of the investigation fueled suspicions of foul play. The investigation officially concluded in February 2019, but the lingering questions surrounding Tamla's death ensured that her story was far from over. For her family and supporters, the fight for justice had only just begun. As the investigation into Tamla Horsford's death progressed, skepticism about the official findings began to grow. While the authorities had ruled her death an accidental fall, inconsistencies in the accounts of that night and the handling of the case raised significant questions. For her family and supporters, the narrative provided by law enforcement didn't add up, and the lack of clarity only fueled their suspicion that foul play might have been involved. One of the most troubling aspects of the case was the inconsistent statements from the partygoers. According to reports, some attendees revised their accounts of the evening, leaving crucial gaps in the timeline of events. Tamla was last seen alive around 1:30 a.m., enjoying a cigarette on the back deck. By 7:30 a.m., she was found face down in the backyard. What happened in those 6 hours? Witnesses described hearing nothing unusual, but this silence seemed implausible given the nature of her injuries. Moreover, no one could definitively explain how she came to fall from the deck. Further compounding the concerns was the decision to move Tamla's body before law enforcement arrived. The homeowner's boyfriend, who was a member of law enforcement, reportedly moved her body to check for signs of life. While his intentions may have been well-meaning, this act potentially contaminated the crime scene and compromised evidence. This decision, coupled with delays in contacting authorities, raised serious red flags. Why wasn't the scene preserved immediately? Why did it take so long for police to be called? The injuries detailed in Tamla's autopsy report also contributed to the doubts. Her injuries included blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and torso, abrasions on her face, and a dislocated wrist. The presence of a laceration to her heart particularly stood out. Forensic experts questioned whether all these injuries could be explained by a simple fall. The absence of definitive evidence left room for speculation, and many believed that the injuries pointed to something more violent. Adding to the complexities of the case were the racial dynamics. Tamla was the only black person at the party, and her death occurred in Forsyth County, Georgia, a place with a long and troubled history of racial tension. The county had been largely white since a violent expulsion of its black residents in the early 1900s, and this history loomed over the investigation. Activists and Tamla's family raised concerns about whether implicit bias or systemic racism had influenced the handling of the case. Was her death investigated as thoroughly as it should have been? Would the case have been treated differently if the victim or the attendees had been of a different race? The suspicions extended beyond her family. The public, driven by grassroots activism and social media, began calling for justice. Online petitions gained hundreds of thousands of signatures, demanding a reopening of the case. For Tamla's loved ones, the inconsistencies, racial context, and mishandling of evidence all pointed to the same conclusion. The official story wasn't enough. They wanted the truth, and they were determined to fight for it. In 2020, the fight for justice in Tamla Horsford's case found new momentum amid a national reckoning over racial injustice and systemic inequality. The resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement following the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others brought renewed attention to cases that had been previously dismissed or mishandled. Among these was Tamla's tragic death, which many believed had been inadequately investigated due to her race and the racial dynamics of the situation. Public outrage over the circumstances surrounding Tamla's death reached a boiling point. Social media platforms became inundated with posts highlighting the inconsistencies in the investigation and the perceived lack of urgency from law enforcement. The case struck a chord with people across the country who identified parallels between Tamla's story and broader patterns of racial bias in the justice system. A petition on change.org demanding the reopening of her case quickly went viral, amassing over 700,000 signatures. The overwhelming support made it clear the public wasn't willing to let Tamla's story be forgotten. Facing mounting public pressure, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, agreed to revisit Tamla's case. For her family and supporters, this development represented a glimmer of hope. Finally, there was a chance for a more thorough investigation that might uncover the truth about what happened that night. The GBI began its review by examining the evidence, autopsy reports, and statements from the original investigation. Activists and Tamla's family called for transparency, urging the GBI to explore the possibility of foul play and address the glaring inconsistencies that had haunted the case from the beginning. However, in July 2021, the GBI announced its conclusion,
releasing a statement saying the district attorney's review of the case does not support criminal charges. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office had ruled her death an accident, saying she fell from a second-story balcony.
There was no evidence of foul play. They upheld the original findings of the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, reaffirming the cause of death as an accidental fall. This announcement devastated Tamla's family and supporters, who felt the investigation had once again failed to deliver justice. For many, it was a bitter reminder of the systemic obstacles faced by families seeking accountability in cases involving Black victims. Despite the GBI's findings, public interest in Tamla's case remains strong. Her story has become a rallying cry for those advocating for greater scrutiny of law enforcement practices and the need for reform in how cases are handled, particularly in communities with histories of racial tension. For Tamla's loved ones, the fight for justice is far from over. They continue to push for the truth, determined to ensure her life and legacy are not reduced to a mere statistic. Despite the official conclusion that Tamla Horsford's death was accidental, many unanswered questions continue to haunt her family, friends, and supporters. The inconsistencies in the investigation, the unexplained delays, and the controversial handling of the crime scene leave a lingering sense that justice has not been fully served. For those who have followed her story, the case feels far from closed. One of the most perplexing aspects of the night is the decision to move Tamla's body before law enforcement arrived. The homeowner's boyfriend, a law enforcement officer himself, reportedly adjusted her position to check for signs of life. While this may have been done with good intentions, it potentially compromised the crime scene. Why wasn't the scene preserved? What impact did this have on the investigation? And could crucial evidence have been lost in the process? Another key issue is the delay in notifying the authorities. Tamla's body was discovered around 7:30 a.m., yet it took some time before police were contacted. What caused the delay? Some partygoers claimed they were too shocked to react immediately, but this hesitation has led to speculation about whether there was an attempt to align stories or minimize suspicions before law enforcement became involved. The presence of the homeowner's boyfriend at the scene also raises serious questions. As someone with a background in law enforcement, his involvement in securing the scene and interacting with responding officers has been scrutinized. Did his connections influence how the investigation was conducted? Did his actions inadvertently or intentionally shape the course of the case? The injuries Tamla sustained remain another source of controversy. While her autopsy described blunt force trauma consistent with a fall, some experts have questioned whether all of her injuries, especially the laceration to her heart, could be explained by the scenario presented by authorities. Could multiple points of impact suggest something more violent? And if so, why wasn't this possibility explored further? Finally, the lack of external witnesses to corroborate what happened that night continues to cast doubt. How could someone fall from a deck without anyone hearing or seeing anything unusual, especially in a house full of people? These unanswered questions fuel ongoing calls for justice. For Tamla's family and supporters, her case highlights deeper issues with how investigations are conducted, particularly in cases involving racial minorities. Until these lingering doubts are addressed, her story remains a mystery, one that continues to demand answers and accountability. Tamla Horsford's death may have been officially ruled an accident, but the unanswered questions surrounding her case continue to resonate deeply. For many, her story symbolizes the need for justice in cases where the truth feels elusive. Was Tamla's death a tragic accident, or is there more to the story that remains hidden? Her family and supporters refuse to let her memory fade, and neither should we. What do you think happened that night? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in keeping this conversation alive. If Tamla's story has moved you, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Every action helps amplify her story, ensuring that it continues to be heard. Together, we can honor Tamla's legacy and push for the answers her family deserves. Let's not allow this to be just another forgotten case. The fight for justice must go on.